Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Absolute Candor. This time for The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 2, Through the Valley. Oh, Mike, we have a lot to discuss in this episode. So we're going to just preface this by saying, as we did in our first episode, this is a full spoiler discussion. If you have not watched Last of Us Season 2, Episode 2, Through the Valley before clicking on this video and starting to listen to our conversation, please hit pause, go away, go watch it, come back, because the internet is just awash with spoilers and discussion and conversation around this pivotal episode. It's kind of as we'll get into in our podcast, it's a very game-changing moment for this show. It essentially shapes the narrative of everything to come, much like it was in part 2 in the game. It was a defining moment for both that narrative and obviously the adaptation we've seen from HBO. We have a lot to cover. Let's just dive straight in. I figured that the way I wanted to attack this, because it was 57 minutes of just harrowing, tense action in different forms, I wanted just to dive in. What was the immediate feeling for you coming out of that episode, Mike? What was your sort of initial take?
I think I got to like 10 minutes before the end, and I thought this is when we come to talk about this on Absolute Candor. Like, it's 5 stars, amazing episode. Like, I couldn't fault it at all. And it was up to that point, it was like moderately harrowing, but it's like I was just enjoying the action sequences, and and then like the climax of the episode, it like completely destroyed me mentally and emotionally. And I don't think it would change my score for the episode, but just kind of my emotions just had completely changed. I was just like enjoying it as almost like a guilty pleasure, watching these people that I'm not particularly attached to struggle through a situation. And it was really well, like you said, a spectacle. It was really well done. Basically the attack on the settlement. And then because basically you're only really invested in Joel and Ellie in the show. There's a few other likable characters, but it's not like I don't think many people are that attached to the settlement and the people at the settlement, other than like Joel's brother, maybe a little bit. But,
I think Tommy, has landed quite well in this adaptation, as he did in the game. I think that's worked quite nicely, and I
was rooting for him.
Yeah, we mentioned it a little bit in last episode, where I think Dina has come in and made a very strong impression in this second season. I think it's well cast. It's a great performance from that actress, Isabella Merced, but also I just think the writing for her was particularly strong. We addressed it before, and it plays out here. Her relationship with Joel is much more explicit, much more pronounced in this adaptation, and it's serving the story really nicely. It gives it a different flavour, giving Joel a different partnership with someone of a similar age to Ellie, makes it a really interesting dynamic between them. It's something that I wanted to address, actually. We've been talking about this as well, is that I was quite hesitant initially to compare the game and the show, trying to take for it, what it is. And I think, given that you've just spoken to what your sort of initial kind of the gut reaction to it, I came out of it, I found it just as harrowing and emotionally draining as the moment in the game. There's some things I think, therefore, that have made me inevitably compare it, and I'm not going to be quite so resistant to that anymore. I think it's healthy, actually, and really interesting conversation to take something that I'm obviously really passionate about, the original source material, and directly discuss and compare it. I've kind of 180'd on that a little bit, just because of the nature of it, just because of the way that this story has been constructed. And there's actually a lot more that's different in this second episode than there was even in the first. I feel like, as much as they are calling back to certain moments and the key narrative beats are hitting, there's a lot more here that wasn't present in the game, or at the very least has been expanded upon.
So how does it play out? Because when I watched it, I at the back of my mind while I was enjoying it was, I'm glad this is like a shock to me, and I wasn't expecting this. As much as I was aware of what happened to Joel based on spoilers for the game and stuff. Like, I didn't know when it happened or
how,
or how. So it still came as a shock to me. It's one of those, like, I kept wanting. It's got Game of Thrones vibes, because on the wall of the town they've got the fires lit and it's snowing and all of that. But it's also, it's hard not to compare it to The Walking Dead, and it reminded me of the TV show of The Walking Dead show a lot, because they often have two extremely harrowing things happening at the same time in that
Yes,
show, and that it just really, like, you've got a team off somewhere getting their asses kicked, and then a team back at the settlement getting their asses kicked, and it really, yeah, as much as it's based on the game, just really reminded me, as
yeah.
well as in the kind of gruesome detail of what happens to
For
Joel.
sure, and I think that intercutting between the two, you saw that sort of the progression of trying to outrun the horde. We followed Abby for a little bit there, then cutting back to Jackson as they're preparing. I think that actually was the preparation of Jackson and getting ready for that fight was the most like Game of Thrones I think this show has been up to this point. Also, then you then take in the scale. Everything from that fantastic sequence where Abby sort of triggers the horde to come out the snow as she's falling down the mountain, and then the chase, the fence sequence, and all of those elements that then the intercutting back and forth between the urgency of Joel, Dina, and Abby getting to the cabin, with you sort of knowing, because they've established in this version early what Abby's motivations are. You don't know that at this point in the game. You actually don't know why she's hunting Joel in the game. They keep that completely obscured.
I think, as much as, like, from someone who didn't know what was going to happen, because it's really well acted, you think that Abby is grateful that she's been saved and is going to actually help Joel and Ellie out.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a triple.
It's a great rug
thing.
pull that I think works irrespective of whether you know the source material, and that's to its credit. I think, as they managed to deliver that and they managed to make that work. You sort of layer on top of that. You mentioned sort of the two groups in different stakes of struggle in terms of what they're going through. There's the obvious physical, imposing nature of that horde approaching the wall, and I love the barrels down, that had them having a defense for that, and all of those elements. Yeah. The bloater, also Tommy, the flamethrower, the cornering him, that whole sequence I thought was just so brilliantly done and very video game. It felt like a mini boss. It had that kind of vibe to him, backed into a corner. On top of that, you then have, again, to reference both Walking Dead and Game of Thrones, as you've done already, there is they're not afraid to pull punches. That a character as fundamental as Joel and an actor as popular and essentially a linchpin of the show in Pedro Pascal, the willingness to kill off someone like that in the second episode rather than saving it for a finale or the series finale or the pilot, or they didn't just throw that moment away, for it to come at this point in the season after what was actually now, by comparison, a relatively slow burn first episode, certainly in comparison to this, I think was again very much evoking of both Game of Thrones and Walking Dead. Is that there is that. I think it's helpful for investment as an audience, is that you don't think, oh, well, that's a main character, they couldn't possibly be killed off, and it's got that Ned Stark kind of vibe to it from Game of Thrones. You're not going to kill off Sean Bean, even though he's died in 100 films, but yet he was on the chopping block of that first season, so it's great for stakes.
That comparison is really good because sorry, like half of me is upset because Joel's dead, and half of me is upset because Pedro Pascal's not in the rest of the season.
I know, and he's so good.
I like the character, but I also really like the actor.
Yeah,
and it's a disappointment in the best possible way that he's not in the rest of the season. So yeah, kind of a double.
Well, let's there's the two sort of main thrusts to this story. We've kind of addressed that build up with Abby. Something I did want to mention is that the bit with the fence, where she's slowly being crushed, and you see that fantastic, the prosthetics, and that was amazing. The cut through the hand and them forcing themselves over. That is, you play as Abby during the prologue of The Last of Us before Joel's death, and that fence sequence is almost like, that's very much evoking the game. Joel stepping in, saving her. The big change, though, is Tommy and Joel are together on patrol and rescue Abby. It's not Dina. Dina is elsewhere. So
is the settlement attacked at the same time?
The Jackson settlement attack does not happen in the video game.
Okay.
You don't play it or see it at all in Last of Us Part 2. And so for me, that entire, half this episode was a completely original approach and take. And I think it worked really well for the TV medium to have the sort of the big scale threat and then the very personal, emotional threat that you see with Abby and Joel in the cabin.
And we were talking last week about how they perhaps needed to get their money's worth from that set for the settlement
Well,
set, and they certainly got
there it
to it
is.
from this
Yeah.
episode. And I think, like, I understand in a game, while they could technically show the settlement being attacked, it doesn't really make sense because you're not role playing as anyone that's there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit weird for them to show you. Some games do that kind of thing, but I think I like that they've been felt free enough to kind of invent this as happening, and because they've done that, it has to be Tommy that's there because it's his settlement and he's
these I think are the smartest. Yeah, these I think are the smartest iterative changes that the show has made, which is that stuff that's been referenced before in the game. So take Bill and his partner, that incredible episode in season 3 of the first season. Probably the highlight, and almost none of that material is from the game. It's all just been referenced in what was hinted at in the subtext of the dialogue and maybe some of the letters you find around. There are references in part 2 to Jackson fighting off attacks by the infected and other groups. Sort of there's hints of that sort of percolate towards going into the third episode. The notion, though, of them like actually, cutting to a flashback of the fight or of the Jackson sequence, or you actually playing it yourself, doesn't happen in the game at all. So it was certainly for me, it was a great hook into the HBO adaptation that they were willing to create this such an ambitious. I'm just thinking also just from a technical point of view, such an ambitious sequence that almost felt like it was a constantly one-upping itself in terms of escalation. I love the rooftop push, the dogs at the end, the bloater. There was some great step-ups in terms of the action in that. It wasn't just a firefight. It wasn't just... Yeah,
there's some epic bits in that. When Tommy's there with the flamethrower and he's got a few guys with him and two of them run off.
Two of them sack it off. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I was thinking, you do not want to be there with a flamethrower when they're running at you, because they're not going to die before they get to you, are they?
No,
it seemed like a bad strategic decision. But I get that I think, overthinking it now, but probably as like the leader of the settlement, he wanted to set an example.
Yep.
If they breach the walls, I'm basically
I'm the last line. We've got exactly. The rooftop positions, which again I thought that was really well staged. The fact that the set could support that they could have people like there was that fantastic shot of Maria on the roof taking out infected, and then the camera follows her down the stairs, showing you that it feels like a cohesive, real place.
And the bloater wanting to go and get her. And then Tommy seeing it and
getting his attention, and for sure. Really just all of those beats weren't things at all taken from the game. So the fact that they were able to construct that sequence, it was harrowing to watch. And then even right up to the end, without having to introduce the character or there being a music cue or a slow camera push, you saw that slow camera fade up where one of the soldiers you don't see shows the bite. And just Tommy raising a gun and having to execute him. Just all of that sort of very carefully placed visual storytelling was happening throughout that whole sequence. Just brilliantly constructed. And also just shout out to the amount of practical effects going on in that sequence. Like the actors playing the infected, slamming themselves through like glass doors and like breaking into that. There's that great shot of the basement with the door kind of bowing.
When they first breach the wall, I think I was thinking they've got like a second line of defense, they'll be able to hold them off, but literally as soon as they're through the wall, they sprint into the shops and up the stairs and get the people on the rooftops. It all falls
very
apart
fast,
so
isn't
fast.
It? Yeah.
Which was really... just shows you how dangerous the infected are.
Now, I'm glad you said that, because I think in direct comparison to The Walking Dead, where those characters after 11 seasons became so capable and so trained that the Walkers lost their threatening... They weren't a sort of a credible threat anymore, almost a bit of a joke in a way. I feel like, especially now we're only two seasons in, but the infected feel like a credible and potent threat in this world. It feels like despite all the preparations, and they go to great lengths, don't they, quite early in the episode to show you like the tractors being backed up into the main gates and all of the prep with the torches on the wall and load. I love that Tommy's briefing in the town hall as well in the council chamber. Just him talking about that, you go high, go low. All of that terminology and the way they showed that process really helped build the tension in that sequence. And it just as also purely just as a spectacle, I think was a remarkable achievement. Just the fact that that's on a television budget and
I felt once they breached the walls and got onto the rooftops, and Tommy was like the last guy left
Backing
with his
into a corner.
flamethrower.
Yeah.
I thought that was it. That Jackson was basically going to be overrun by
Yeah.
infected.
I did
I
wonder
couldn't
if
see
they were
how
going
they
to
were going
bump.
to get out of that.
I wondered if Maria or Tommy would get bumped off in that sequence. I didn't know whether that would be like kind of one
That's one
too
of the
many.
yeah. It's
Given.
trouble with the bites as well. Is like
Hmm.
you never feel safe. Like when they hug at the end, it's like I kept expecting one of them to show that they'd
To
been bitten
reveal.
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great, but what great a great achievement they've made there to make us constantly question that when we know, cutting back and forth to what's going on with Joel, that there's something percolating there and there's a real tension building. There was a real version of this that could have played out where they strung out that whole sequence across multiple episodes. So there's also something to be said, I think, for how economic they were in terms of the storytelling. They didn't that Joel in the cabin sequence could have. There are shows that could have made that a 3-part storyline that they
yeah.
kept cutting back to, but they were
Well,
economical with that and they just got on with it, which is good.
yeah, probably getting ahead of myself a bit, but at the time I was a bit disappointed we didn't get to see Ellie's proper reaction to Joel getting killed. Like we saw, obviously it was a massive blow, but then basically the episode ends, so you don't get to see, how it actually affects her immediately in the moment. Particularly, it's just they just want to leave you with I guess the shock, which, like, on reflection, I think was the right thing to do. But at the time, it's like I kind of wanted to
See more of that. I
a
wonder
bit
if that's
more of
gonna
that.
if that'll play out in episode 3. We kind of see that kind of see what that reaction looks like. The the crawl across the floor was actually the bit that got me, where she then sort of interlocks her hands with Joel, and that slow crane shot sort of pulling away, really sort of underplayed and sort of and fun little production thing there. That's Ashley Johnson singing Through the Valley at the end, who played Ellie in the video games, and
Oh, cool.
Through the Valley was the song in the trailer for The Last of Us Part 2 that Ellie, the announcement trailer for the game, that Ellie sings, and then she says, I'm going to kill every last one of them. At this point, obviously, we don't know that Joel's going to die, but lovely connection to the game. They're having Ashley Johnson do and it was a re-recorded version because she was singing as herself, I think, rather than playing Ellie, which she does in the game.
Right.
It's in the game she deliberately modulates her voice so she doesn't actually have as clean a sound. This was very much Ashley Johnson doing a cover of Through the Valley, and it was just pitch perfect in terms of the touchstone to the game and just sort of a fun little kind of emotional connection to what she performed, obviously, as Ellie.
Does this event happen basically at the start of the game?
Within the first 2 or 3 hours, yeah. Yeah, and it really does inform the rest of the story and how that plays out, which you'd expect for something so fundamental. But let's get to it. Let's get to the scene that everyone's talking about. I want to just start by saying, I think, kind of piggybacking off of our episode 1, beautifully acted by all involved. So that's Pedro Pascal, Bella Ramsey, and then Caitlin Dever as Abby. Just outstanding in terms of the performance. It was so emotional, and in the case of Pedro, I think played really underplayed. He didn't drop character, he didn't suddenly become frantic and panicky. He stayed consistent as Joel, and that's to their credit. Another sort of something I've been reading about since the episode aired, Caitlin Dever actually lost her mum a few weeks before. In real life, lost her mother before filming the episodes. So this was all accessing that emotion, given her character lost her father in the show. A lot of that raw emotion, I think, was that kind of accessing that emotional memory. It really grounded her performance. Not you, of course, would have wished that upon her, but there was definitely moments in that where I feel like she was drawing on her real experiences to portray that. And that was a really, really satisfying thing to watch her be so believable in her rage and her betrayal. And I think just pitch perfect across the board. I mean, no notes on that. I really do think they played that beautifully.
Yeah, I think I would have liked to have seen, given we saw her at the start of the first episode, I would have liked to have seen a bit more on the other Fireflies, because most of them don't seem to be particularly in favor of killing Joel, certainly not in the way he died. And they're obviously questioning her in quite a stereotypical torture scene kind of way, like you don't do, you're going too far, just
Mm.
end it, that kind of thing. And it just began to stretch my capability to believe it felt real. Just the number of them that were like not sure about what she was doing, and that they basically followed her through hell, presumably to get this far, and then they're like questioning. Well, like, you feel like to follow her that far, they've got to be basically as angry with Joel as she is, almost. Although obviously she's got a special connection because her dad.
Yeah,
got
well,
killed.
I think that's really fair because it plays into something. I think it's my only major criticism of this episode. It plays into that, which is that I think in that specific instance, I think less is more. I think they could have stripped away a lot of those cutaway shots to like Owen and Mel and those other characters, and just seen their reactions, seen them sort of ready and holding, like you see a shot of Owen sort of aiming at Joel before the shotgun blast. By the way, brutal. The flipping him on the
that
floor.
was so well done. I'd love to
So
know how they did that.
and
It's really
the because he says, I saved your life, and then what life, and that whole sequence. So that again, the shotgun blast to the knee is a reference to the game, but doesn't quite play out looking like that. The dialogue back and forth is different. I think they could have done better. I think having those characters almost being like a stunned silence, and the only time that they pipe up is when they sort of the threat on Dina, when she talks about I'll let her live, even though she said about putting her to sleep, etc. In the game, Tommy just gets pistol whipped multiple times and is knocked out.
Yeah, so I felt the sedating was a bit weird, a bit not a very good use of probably quite scarce
supplies,
medical resources.
Yeah, so this all ties in, I think, with where I wanted to go with this. I think that's a fair point as well. So I think less is more would have been great with those other characters. I think cutting away to them to just show reactions rather than having dialogue just being thrown in. It felt like the same problem I had in the first episode where it was like, oh, we need to give these guys a line and let's just give them one line each to cut away to them. It just felt a bit forced and didn't really work. The big thing for me is I think Abby, much like again in the sort of first episode, I think a lot of her dialogue was a bit overwritten. I think they could have trimmed a lot of that monologuing that she does. It gives Joel the moment where he's like, just fucking get on with it, which is great and totally works for his character. But like the stuff about her saying how handsome he is didn't. It was really jarring that moment. That felt like it was an odd. And then she's like, "Congrats on that." That felt very unnatural and just not what you'd be saying in that moment. That really didn't land for me at all. And then after the shotgun blast, which was great, like that bit worked brilliantly. The crouching down and sort of explaining her backstory with exposition to Joel while he's suffering on the floor. I just don't think you'd be thinking about who you are when all you should be thinking about is your motivation for the action. It just took away, I think, from that moment, and it made I just would have played more with silence, more with stillness, and then had those every line perhaps be a bit more economy of words, just saying what needed to be said to convey. Because then when we cut that bit where she just silently gets the golf club out of the holster and says, "You don't get to rush this," that's a lift from the game as well. That worked brilliantly. That was such a great moment for her to then go straight into, and we seeing then the torture. We don't see that in the game. Them being very explicit with her just wailing on him and seeing that worked really well for TV being such a visual medium. I just would have liked, I think, just her monologue didn't work for me. It was just not particularly very well acted, so I won't fault the actress, but I think it was overwritten and should have been trimmed down, I think, massively.
I do think it's quite hard. I don't disagree at all. I do think with her character, it's quite hard because she's had to play as if she's a good guy for half of the episode, and then the other half she's playing a villain effectively to us. And then in that monologue, like you said, when she calls him handsome and congrats on that, it's kind of almost confused between the two personas because she's supposed to be really angry and just focused on killing him, and she's also being like grateful that she's been saved. And then there's like this weird like comedy kind of
it makes
completely out of place.
It makes the moment where she says to Mel, like tells her to shut up, it actually lessened the like she didn't feel threatening at all there when she said that to me. That was quite that again was quite jarring because it came so soon after that dialogue, which just didn't work for me. Then when it became more about her singular focus on Joel, you don't get to rush this and the stuff later. Like, when Ellie bursts in, from that point, when Ellie finally arrives at the lodge and you hear like the thudding of Abby just wailing on him.
That was really nice.
That sequence of her moving down, the gunshot, her being pinned to the floor, and then the actual death itself was so visceral, like the broken golf club into the neck. By the way, that is so much more graphic than what the game does.
Yeah.
The game, it's just one final hit with the golf club. That's the last shot, and then
Ellie turns up in the game.
Yeah. You play as Ellie. That moment works so well. It's rather than going up, you go down. It's in a basement in the game, and you play as Ellie running down the stairs and burst in. And then it goes to the cutscene.
Okay.
Whereas I think actually this longer build up to Joel being killed, and then the manner in which they finally like finish his character, so brutal, and I think it gives much better justification visually for what Ellie is obviously then feeling and what we're going to inevitably see her do. That was fantastically well done, which led us into those final moments, cutting back to Jackson, seeing the aftermath, then finally obviously Joel's body being taken away in the slow fade to black. I thought that the button on the episode, the way they tied it all up, I felt like I was so invested. I was really emotional as well watching it, just like I was playing the game. So I had a similarly sort of visceral reaction myself. Felt kind of drained afterwards too. Like I felt like I couldn't believe what I just watched.
Yeah, to be honest, it works so well for TV because you watch that and then you've got a week to dwell on it. Whereas in the game, you're straight into playing the next.
Because you stay as Ellie, you like. It skips ahead a couple weeks, and bam, you are back in there on the sticks. You're playing as her.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I was thinking,
yeah,
it's one of those episodes of TV you just can't get out of your head. And in hindsight, when they first, they're going up the mountain towards the lodge, and they're wondering whether they can make it.
Mm-hmm.
And then Joel sees that Jackson's under attack, and he's deciding whether to go back or not. And obviously, if he'd have gone back, he would have survived. Well, you don't know because obviously there's a horde attacking it, but probably would have survived.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's the trusting nature. He's probably let his guard down being in Jackson for so long.
Yeah, and he's probably also considering Dina as well in that moment. Getting her, because she has the frostbite, we see, don't we? Like, it's getting her to the lodge actually became his motivating factor. It wasn't Abby, I don't think, because he was, like you say, he was pulling to go back to Jackson. It's about getting her out the cold, and that being the critical moment. That sort of that either or that ultimately then he met his end.
And in the game, him and Tommy agree to go to the lodge.
Yes, so Joel rescues Abby from the fence sequence, just as you see, but he's traveling with Tommy, and then Abby does a sort of similar justification. We've got shelter, we've got guns, etc. And it's because the Jackson attack isn't happening. What they're actually running from is the horde. They're running from that, and that's what they get to the lodge. You actually in the game, it's a really interesting sequence. Actually, you're riding on the horse right up to the gates of the lodge with the horde on your tail. Gate opens, you see them slamming into the gate of the lodge, much like you see them hitting into the wall in Jackson, which I think maybe was evoking that a little bit, and then you go into the sequence with Joel and Abby and that whole bit. So that part, actually, for me, there was so many changes to the source material in this, in terms of the way they wrote it, which again didn't always land for me, but the scale of the action, the way it was it ultimately played out, moments, we don't get a moment in the game of Ellie with Joel at all. That was something unique to the show as well. So that actually, they're compared to the first episode, which actually I think was a little too beholden to the games and a little bit too wanting to kind of work within those constraints. I really praised this episode for being willing to take some risks, and even if they didn't always land, I enjoyed it much more simply as a viewer of the show than I expected to, and it worked in its favor for that reason. So
one other bit I just wanted to quickly mention is, at the end of episode 1, they introduced that the whatever the like fungi thing is called,
the tendril things, isn't it? The
tendrils going through the pipes into the settlement, and then in this episode, someone digs through the pipe,
and the
tendrils, and that's what triggers. And you see the two hordes like change direction.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, I wasn't sure that they were going towards the settlement, but then you have the guy on the wall that spots them, and I thought that was nice, just that they felt they needed to explain that, and that they did bother to explain it, and they preempted it in the first episode, because like, it probably would have been enough just that a horde comes out of the ground and attacks the settlement.
The Abbey had disturbed, maybe. But actually, it was a nice, I think, touchstone between the two episodes. It makes it... I just love this kind of serialized storytelling where they put those... They're not Easter eggs, they're setup. It's like deliberate setup for something to pay off, not necessarily a season later, but even the next episodes. And obviously, the big... episode 3 will be that fallout of what we've seen here, and I hope that we spend a lot of time with Ellie and we get to see that. So folks, that will wrap it up for episode 2 of Absolute Candor, reviewing The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 2. You can find us on all of the things at Burly Media. That is Facebook, Instagram, Threads, YouTube, Spotify, Podbean, and also our Discord. We'll be posting new episodes up every single week. Also, just a quick shout out to our couple of other shows. We have System Link that Mike and I shoot every Wednesday live over on Twitch. It's our gaming podcast, and also our Some Drivel interview podcast. We have a couple of really good episodes got recently. One with John Billingsley from Star Trek Enterprise and Josh Kyoto from Indie Former. That went up just at the time of this recording earlier tonight. So folks, please do consider checking those out. Mike, where can people find you?
They can find me at thexboxguide.com and at the Xbox Guide on Threads and Blue Sky.
Lovely, folks. We will see you in the next video for our review of Last of Us Season 2, Episode 3. We will see you next time.
Yeah.